Well, that guy seems smart. Okay, go to lawandcrime.com to learn a little bit more of the top trending stories of the day and great reporting by our very own Anthony Velez. But now we are going to be talking about the Kristopher Love case because we are going to be live in that trial today, and there is a lot to discuss. And joining me on set right now is a very special guest. I haven't been on with her in quite some time, so I'm so happy to have her back. Editor here at Law and Crime, Elura Nanos. Elura, it's great to have you here and on such an early morning.
Thanks, Jesse. That is such a fantastic welcome. I'm very excited to be here with you
Thank
today.
you. I was excited to give you that welcome, that introduction.
I love it.
All right, let's talk about Kristopher Love. We haven't had a chance to talk about it. From reaction as the prosecution slowly concludes their case, I think they have one more witness, the medical examiner, who will testify today. How do you think they're doing?
I don't think that they could be doing too much better. I mean, they have a videotape. They have a motive. They have a fairly clear story of what happened, and they have this incredibly damning interview tape with the defendant. And, by the way, they have Cortez, who is there to explain the entire thing for them. So they're doing pretty well.
Yeah, we're going to break down each one of the pieces of evidence they've presented, including the testimony of Kristopher Cortez. But as the defense begins their case, will they begin their case? Will they do anything, or will they just say, hey, you know what, there's no way we can get him off of the guilt or innocence phase. Let's just focus on the sentencing phase because this is a death penalty case?
Well, I mean, I don't know that as a defense attorney, you ever go in there and say, there's no way we could accomplish anything, so we're just defeated and we're not going to try. I don't think that that's really the move. I mean, certainly they could say, this isn't looking good, we're going to focus on the penalty phase. But I think really it's more of a strategic call about how they're going to do the best. Not that they can't do anything, but that sometimes there is the argument that the defense can do better by not saying anything, leaving the prosecution's case as it is, and then on argument saying, this doesn't meet a reasonable doubt standard. So sometimes that's really effective. It's not because they can't do anything, but rather because sometimes that's the most strategic thing to do. And I think we may see that here. On the other hand, I think when you have a case like this where there's such intrigue and, you know, it is kind of an unusual case because it's murder for hire and it's this love triangle, I think that a defense attorney would have to think real carefully about not putting on a case because I think the jury's going to want something.
Yeah, well, they, you know what they wanted? They wanted to hear from the defendant. And we always wonder if the defendant's going to take the stand. Now, he hasn't taken the stand yet, but what we did see was his police interrogation tape. Let's play a little bit for you right now of that tape, and then you be the judge about whether or not this man should take the stand. Take a look. Well, Mr. Love says he doesn't know any of these people, and that there would be no reason that his skin cells would be in the vehicle that was allegedly used in this crime. Now, Laura, we should trust him, right?
Sure we should. You know, the thing that I don't understand is allegedly these three people went through all of this planning to figure out how they were going to conduct this crime, right? But the planning stopped as soon as the trigger was pulled. There was no plan for what to do should the police come after them, because this guy clearly has no concept of stopping talking, asking for an attorney, and stopping incriminating himself. What he's doing there is the most damning piece of evidence that we even have. So as terrible as it is that they committed this crime, and there's a videotape and all of that, connecting this guy with the crime, really the most weighty piece of evidence is his own words. I do not understand how these people don't know to stop talking.
You know what I find fascinating? One of the reasons that when you'll hear Kristopher Cortez testify in a minute is they thought Brenda Delgado, the person that brought them into this plot to kill Ms. Hatcher, was that, oh, she's part of the cartel. So she can supply money, she can supply drugs, whatever they need. Why would Brenda need these two to take care of Miss Hatcher if she's got the cartel? I mean, clearly we're not working with professionals here.
Yeah, no kidding. We're not even working with people who watch like TV here. I mean, clearly if this woman was connected to the cartel, they wouldn't get this clown to come and get involved with. The three of them are planning it where they're borrowing a car from somebody.
Hey, he's like, hey, we got to wear gloves.
We knew gloves, that's it. They got the gloves down. It just seems like it's almost, not to make light of a gruesome crime, but it really seems almost ridiculous that these people, you know, tried to pull off what they thought of as a caper, you know, and did really a pretty lousy job with it.
Well, you know, Mr. Love denied all of it, but you know who told the jury that he was intimately involved with every aspect of the planning? Crystal Cortez, the getaway driver. Let's see some of her testimony where she implicates Mr. Love. So methodical in their planning, yet they were all arrested. And Elura, interestingly enough, this was the worst getaway driver ever. When she backed up out of that parking space, she went the wrong way.
She couldn't even drive out of the parking lot the right way. This is like, this reminds me almost of those, heist movies where it's always the person who drives the getaway car that doesn't really realize that they're on the hook to the same extent that the big mama criminal is, And this woman, I assume on taking that 35-year plea, learned a hard lesson in accomplice liability, that when you're part of a crime network committing a crime together, everyone is on the hook to the same extent, whether or not you were the person who planned it or pulled the trigger.
You're absolutely right, except it's only Mr. Love who could face the death penalty, and there's some serious consequences if in this case. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to play more of his police interrogation tape. Well, apart from Mr. Love appearing to be very cold in the interrogation room and wearing that pink Snuggie, he got into that back and forth with the detective right there. Now, Elura, it's never good to get into a back and forth with the interrogator, is it? It's
not, because, there's two things going on during an interrogation. There's two purposes to that. The first is the actual interaction with the cops, and it doesn't play well to fight with them in that direct kind of situation. But then there's also the evidentiary value, which is what we're seeing now, and it doesn't play well with the jury. Now, in a situation where perhaps the police officer is bullying someone into giving a statement, that kind of creates a different dynamic, but that's not what's going on here. It's just making him look bad.
Now, his interrogation was about 20 hours. Obviously, this was edited down. But is that a tactic? Whenever you have a suspect, if you know they know something, or if you know that they did it, even if they're first denying it, just wear them down until they ask for a lawyer. In other words, just keep asking them questions. You can keep them there, keep talking. Because, look at this tape. He's eventually just giving in and confesses to what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely a tactic, and it's a very effective tactic. It would be effective on many people, because even if one of us were stuck in an interrogation room for 20 hours, we might not admit to homicide that we didn't do, but we would be at our worst. And we would be at our worst with respect to making up stories, or with remembering things, or with, connecting details. So I think it's a very effective tactic, and it's one that the police always have at their fingertips. This guy should have asked for a lawyer early on.
So what does the defense do to counteract that really bad tape that was played yesterday?
There's not a lot that they can do to directly counteract it. What they can do is they can give a really effective cross-examination of the police officer, try to vilify the police officer to some extent. The defense can also, of course, put the guy on the stand to testify now, and hopefully that and hope that his in-court testimony is much more effective and persuasive than the tape was. But in this case, that tape is a preview for what kind of witness this guy is going to be. I would never put him on the stand.
Don't say that. That would be great, entertaining viewing and watching for all of our viewers to see. But I'm not sure that's going to happen. But we are going to be live in the Kristopher Love case. The medical examiner is expected to testify today. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, so you have someone who was right there when the shooting took place. And this was really a tragic series of events. I want to bring back in Elura Nanos to talk about this. So, Elura, you know what's strange is they planned this out. They planned every detail of it. They stalked her for 2 weeks. And yet they decided to gun her down in such a public place. Does that make sense?
I was thinking exactly about that actually on my way in today. Because I'm listening to and reading all this stuff about the planning and they gloves and they met with each other. I cannot understand for the life of me why they wouldn't have picked something that either was a more remote location or like a quieter way of killing her. There are plenty of ways that they could kill somebody. And I understand that maybe using a gun was sort of easier in some ways. But, this really was not planned in a way to avoid detection. It's almost like they put all of the effort into the planning of how they were going to accomplish it, but none of the effort into planning to avoid being detected or arrested or found out at all.
Yeah, they didn't take into account witnesses, surveillance footage, the fact that they were using the car of Jose Ortiz, who was a man that knew Brenda Delgado, and Crystal Cortez was driving his car. I mean, if you're going to commit this kind of crime, you have to think about the evidence, and wearing gloves so that when you clean off the weapon isn't going to be enough. And the question is, the reason they apparently went with the shooting was because Love said, let's go with that route, as opposed to injecting her or kidnapping her. And that even implicates him more.
Right. I don't even really, also, thinking about the logistics of this, if these two women were planning this, why on earth would they just ask this guy, who he's just the kind of trigger man? Why would they go with his method when they're the ones that are planning so much? None of it really fits together, other than to say, maybe these people just aren't that bright. I mean, I could easily imagine that someone would think that because the car that's used didn't belong to one of them, and yes, was borrowed by someone who knew them, but wasn't one of their cars, that they thought that somehow that was creating enough of a distance in the evidence to have it be a car that wasn't connected to them.
Are you ever amazed that when you listen to the planning of this and you see the individuals who were arrested and implicated and charged, that they were able to pull it off?
I mean, the sad truth is that violent crime is not necessarily that difficult to pull off. I mean, it's certainly difficult to pull it off and avoid being arrested or convicted of it. But, violent crime happens around us every day, and it happens, and it's not, unfortunately, we live in a world where weapons are easy to come by, and of course there's not security everywhere. So it's not surprising to me that even three idiots could find a way to shoot this poor woman. And I think we're seeing now that their lack of planning and lack of ability to plan well, they were caught easily, they're going to get convicted easily, and nothing that they did in all that planning really is going to help them out at all.
Well, as you can imagine, Kristopher Love's trial is still continuing. We're waiting for the live feed. He still has a defense to put on, and we're going to have to see which way the jury goes. But so far, the evidence presented by the prosecution has been very strong. And one of the things that we've been playing you so far this morning is his police interrogation tape. Let's play a little bit more of that for you right now. And this is, again, a conversation about the speed in which this shooting took place. I think that's a very important aspect, because we see these kinds of shootings, and many times looking from the outside in, we don't appreciate how quickly this can all turn bad. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about this. And again, we expect the live feed in the courtroom today and any moment. So as soon as we get it, we're going to go live. But Laura, we can't forget that this is a death penalty case, okay? Now, I could be wrong here, but I think in Texas, they haven't had this kind of death penalty case since 2013. And he would be the first one who may be, sentenced to death in quite some time. Why do you think the prosecutors wanted the death penalty on the table for this specific case?
Well, I think that whenever you have a case where there's multiple people involved, then the death penalty really becomes a good bargaining chip. You take it away from one, you get the person to testify against the other. I mean, that's what we see what happened with Cortez. She got a deal, and that deal, created the opportunity for her testimony. And I think murder for hire is, in most states that have the death penalty, that creates it, makes it be a capital crime, that it's murder for hire. So I think that you have a number of things. You have a totally unsympathetic defendant. This was not a murder that happened because of any kind of heat of passion. In fact, he had no motive at all. It was sort of, his only motive was to be paid a very small amount of money. So, and I think that, that factor really weighs heavily into the prosecution's decision to seek the death penalty, because it really just makes the facts so egregious. But I think also when you have this kind of situation where people could potentially point fingers at one another, then it becomes a strategic thing as well. And the facts here are so damning for Love, for the defendant. I mean, so damning that I would think that you put the death penalty out there, and then you hope that the guy just pleads, because what is he going to do? He's not likely to beat the charges. Yeah, and that's, it's really a strong case, and it makes you think, what's the value of a human life when apparently all he needed was some money and some drugs to take out somebody, well, allegedly. So we're going to have to still see what happens in the courtroom and what defense his team will put forward, if any, like Elura and I just talked about. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, a lot more to discuss. Stay tuned. Wow.
That is chilling. Laura, one of the weird things, and actually Lizette Fernandez mentioned it yesterday, this is a classic law school example. You don't get more premeditation than this. Am I right? I mean,
Absolutely.
Is that what makes this so egregious, how much they were planning this?
You know, it's funny that you say that, because when I first read about this case before the trial started, that was the first thing that I thought, is that, you know, premeditation can be very difficult to prove at trial. And very often, premeditation comes down to this very law school-esque kind of definition, where we're talking about the idea that premeditation can be just a couple of minutes or just a couple of seconds before someone pulls a trigger, and it doesn't necessarily have to be planned out, that both things count equally as premeditation. But here, we have the opposite end of the spectrum, where it's like weeks long. There's evidence that these people planned it. There's a reason for it, and there's all this obvious premeditation. There's, in fact, you know, if a jury finds that these people were responsible for killing this woman, there's not really going to be any way that they could find that it wasn't premeditated.
Right.
You know, like, you know, if we say, yes, it was these people and these people caused this dentist's death, what are they going to say? That it wasn't planned? It was obviously planned.
Yeah, and that surveillance footage isn't the only evidence that we know of this premeditation or this stalking. Crystal Cortez, when she took the stand, explained it even more. Take a look. Yeah, we stalked her. Not a problem. Laura, here's my problem with this. How nonchalant can you be talking about planning a murder? How lack of remorse does this woman have as she takes the stand?
You know, there's something about this woman that to me seems very typical of the violent women that I've seen over the course of my career. There's this common thread that I've seen with so many women who have committed violent crimes, which is that they have that very flat affect, sort of disconnected from the humanity of what's going on. And it certainly does come across as no remorse. But I will offer this, that I think in many cases what it actually is a sign of some sort of either mental illness or emotional deficiency. And I'm not saying that that's what she has or that it rises to the level of any kind of defense. But it is something that I've seen very often that presents in both men and women, but I've seen it a lot with women that are involved in violent crimes. And to me, she seems very typical of someone who sort of doesn't care, but doesn't care because she's unplugged from it all.
That is not a mind that I want to jump into,
No.
I'll tell you that much. Let's talk more about the shooting, though, and that's really important. The most important aspect is what happened to Miss Hatcher. And this is when Detective Eric Barnes from the Dallas County Police Department provides an annotated surveillance footage of the shooting, a breakdown of what actually happened. So in case you missed it, take a look. The prosecution is really making out a very strong case, both with forensic surveillance, witness testimony. This is really a strong case that they're putting forward, and we're waiting to see what the defense will ultimately do today when they're maybe handed the case after the testimony from the medical examiner. We believe that's the last witness from the state. Laura, I want to ask you a quick question back to Crystal Cortez. The defense was trying to say that we shouldn't believe her because she took this plea deal, and she's lied before in the past. Why should we believe her now? Seemed to be a good argument that they may have. What do you think?
I think that that's always a good argument, because when the jury finds out that a witness on the stand, A, is a criminal, and B, has a motive for testifying, I think that those are two things that are very difficult to discount. Because as a juror, you're looking there and you're saying, well, I'm evaluating everything about this person's credibility, what they're saying, does it make sense, how they sound, how they appear. But when you factor in this person avoided being in the defendant's chair by giving this testimony, you know that that means that they absolutely would have a motive to lie, and I think that that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, because she could have been facing the death penalty herself, or life in prison. But 35 years for killing someone. We'll be right back.
Trespassing. Authorities in Britain are reportedly searching for a thief who has a strong resemblance to actor David Schwimmer. Police in Blackpool posted screen grabs of CCTV surveillance of a suspect reportedly stealing beer who looked like a Ross Geller doppelganger. Schwimmer later released a video of himself sneaking through a store with a crate of beer in hand and denied any involvement in the heist. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
And in related news, Jennifer Aniston is robbing a bank, so that's always fun. Again, great reporting from Anthony Velez. You can go to lawandcrime.com to learn a little bit more of the top trending stories of the day. But we are going to switch gears here, and I'm going to bring in our very own, our very special guest, editor here on Law and Crime, Elura Nanos, to talk a little bit more about the Kristopher Love case. We expect the medical examiner to testify, maybe the last witness for the prosecution. What can we expect from that testimony?
Well, the medical examiner is going to not really bring any surprises here because in this case, we know exactly what happened, that this woman died because she was shot. So, you know, I mean, I expect that the value of the medical examiner is, number one, to sort of just tie things together, you know, for purposes of reasonable doubt, basically just to make sure that we know exactly what happened. She'll testify that the bullet, in fact, killed the victim. So none of that's going to be a surprise. What may have more impact sort of dramatically into the jury emotionally is that the medical examiner is going to talk about the sort of more gruesome aspect of this. We're gonna learn, you know, maybe that the victim suffered before she actually died. We're gonna learn whether she's, you know, there was pain involved. We're gonna learn how long she was likely alive for before she died. You know, there may be some pictures, there may be some autopsy results, and I think those factors do have the tendency to really end on a very humanizing note to remind jurors how terrible this crime was.
And it's always a difficult day for the family of Kendra Hatcher to listen to all those details. And you can also imagine that it was very difficult for them when we saw the body cam footage of Sergeant Michael Welch from the Dallas County Police Department, who was there and saw the crime scene. Now, the body of Miss Hatcher is blurred out, but you still see the crime scene. Let's play some of that footage for you right now. Oh, my goodness, my goodness, my goodness. Elura and I are talking about what we're watching here. What you were just telling me was hilarious. The fact that not even what he just said on camera in that phone conversation that, oh, I know I should have gotten rid of the gun. The fact that she is, like, okay with it.
You gotta love people that when they date, they're just, I don't know, love makes you blind. Like, she's on the phone with somebody.
Similar interests. Similar interests.
I mean, right, you know, it could be knitting, could be homicide. Who knows? Like, I don't get this. Like, she's on the phone and she's not even remotely alarmed by the fact that he may have killed somebody.
Well, she goes, look, whatever happens with you, I've got your back. So she seems pretty sweet.
Well, you know, she's loyal.
Yeah, she's loyal. Well, I mean, there's something for that.
I can't.
But as if it wasn't bad enough that he does that police interview that goes horribly wrong for him, he's caught on tape, doesn't really know that this is going to be played in a courtroom, and he goes, I know I should have gotten rid of the gun.
I mean, the only logical inference that I can draw here is that Kristopher Love is just not bright. I mean, that is really the only inference to be drawn. Because whether or not he did this, it certainly looks like he did it. And he has to know he's in jail. He has to know someone's listening. And to say, I know, like admitting, like, I know I should have thrown away that gun. I mean, wouldn't you at least attempt to appear innocent? Wouldn't you at least attempt to deny it? And you know, what I'm seeing is this guy either doesn't understand how this all adds up, or he knows that he has no chance of actually skating on these charges. That's what it's seeming like to me. I can't see any alternative explanation.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty tough for the defense to do, but we'll see what they ultimately do when they're handed the case. But let's hear what Detective Eric Barnes, who interviewed Mr. Love, let's hear what he had to say about that jailhouse phone call. Again, that jailhouse phone call did not do him any favors. And Elura, I guess a lot of people are sometimes surprised that these phone calls that people make in jail can be used against them in court. I think a lot of times people are surprised that they're being recorded.
I don't understand that. Are these the same people who are surprised that the police sometimes lie to them during interrogation? I mean, do they not even watch TV to see? Of course it's going to be used against you. It's a prison. Like, this is not confidential. It would be used against you even if they found it somehow when it was a private phone call. But obviously, if it's in a prison, it's going to be used against you.
So let me ask you a question now that I'm thinking about it. People have conversations with their loved ones and family over the phone and while they're in jail, and they tell them everything that happened and this.
They should not do that.
When you have face-to-face meetings with people in jail, that's a different kind of situation, right? You can have more open conversations with them and not be worried that that's recorded.
Yeah, I believe that it's not usually recorded. And if it were, and that's probably because that's considered surveillance in a way that the phone calls are not. But it is my understanding, and I'm not an expert in this, but it's my understanding that no one is particularly secret about the fact that the calls from the jail are recorded. It's not like the prison is doing like a gotcha situation. Like, everyone knows that there's no privacy on these phone calls. So I just don't really understand that how someone could be like sort of trapped into saying something to a person that they know that clearly incriminates them.
Now, I don't know how the defense is going to get out of this little situation, but have you seen cases before where a defense attorney has successfully argued that what you heard on that jailhouse phone call was misinterpreted? That, hey, listen, and think about who they're speaking to here. They're trying not to tell that person really what happened, or maybe they're trying to tell that person one thing which is not really the truth, maybe for different kinds of reasons. Have you ever seen them successfully argue away a really incriminating jailhouse phone call?
Certainly, I have, and certainly in a situation like this where it is incriminating, but is it really incriminating? I don't know. I would give it like a 6 because it's not like he said to her on the phone, "Yes, I killed this person." I mean, that would be almost impossible to argue away. But certainly, you could bring context to something that says, here's why someone would say this. This is what that meant. I don't think it's impossible to do that. I mean, it's not like the defense has no play whatsoever. Certainly, the defense could come in and say, let me characterize this phone call. Let me give you some context that alleviates any, incriminating evidence here. And let me talk about Crystal Cortez and talk about how you should discount her testimony and really break down those blocks. I expect the defense to at least argue that. We'll have to see if the defense is going to bring in witnesses to do that.
Yeah, I was wondering if they were going to bring in his girlfriend and say what was really going on in that phone call.
I think that depends on what the girlfriend would be like as a witness.
Right.
I'm sure the defense has talked to the girlfriend, and there may be a play there depending on how sympathetic or unsympathetic or credible or incredible that girlfriend might be as a witness. Who knows? I mean, if the girlfriend has the potential to offer testimony that could help this defendant, I mean, why not bring her in?
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see. Like we do with every case, we have to wait and see what ultimately happens. Now, I'm told that we have to take a quick break. So we will be right back, and as you can imagine, we have a lot more to discuss in the Kristopher Love case. Okay, that was a key piece of testimony, and we want to break it down right now with Elura Nanos. So there's a point being made here under cross-examination of this witness, that the idea that Crystal here, she provided the key testimony that they needed, some would say, to tie Love to the planning and the murder here. But is it fair that she gets 35 years in prison, can freely testify against Love, while he faces not life in prison, but the potential of the death penalty? Is there a fairness here? And let's not forget that Brenda Delgado doesn't face the death penalty because she was extradited from Mexico, and that, as a part of the terms of that extradition, she can't get the death penalty, and she was the one who put all this in motion. So is that fair?
Well, I think it depends on what you mean by fair. Are we talking about legally fair or morally fair? Legally, it is absolutely fair because that's just the way it works. The first one to come forward is the one that gets the deal. I mean, that's just how it works. And there's nothing unfair about that from a legal standpoint because it is that type of system in our adversarial system that allows someone to come and testify and then get a conviction. Because Crystal's testimony could be really important to getting a conviction here. So we want that to happen. We place great value on getting that witness to come forward. From a moral standpoint, yeah, we certainly could argue that these people are equally responsible for this woman's death. But at the end of the day, Kristopher Love, if we go with the prosecution's theory, he pulled the trigger, no one else. And there is, although we have accomplice liability, which means that everyone is on the hook equally, to me there is always a difference between the person who pulls the trigger and everyone else.
Yes, I agree with you. And then there could be a situation, but the other counter-argument is this would have never happened if it wasn't for Brenda. And that's really what it is. I mean, she was the one who apparently was enraged by the fact that her ex was dating Kendra Hatcher. But I want to play some of the testimony of Crystal Cortez. Again, we keep talking about her, where she talks about her decision to testify. Take a look. So, Elura, I guess it was important for the prosecution, before they call her out, before they ask her any real questions, to explain how she's able to testify today and why she's testifying, to get that big issue of her testifying front and center.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they have to deal with it because, you know, you don't want to run away from something like that. And it does go to the credibility of the witness, and that is a central component of what the jury has to evaluate. So you have to deal with the fact that she took a plea, that she's testifying for that reason.
Do you think she was credible? I mean, again, she's somebody who was not forthcoming with information and actually misled investigators when she was first interviewed. So why should we believe her now in that sense? Or did you think, you know what? She seemed very credible about what she was saying.
You know, I think it's hard to say, and I don't feel like this is a slam dunk on either side. I think there are some witnesses where I walk away and I say, this person is totally credible, and this person was a great witness or horrible. And I would kind of put her in the middle. And, you know, her demeanor is very difficult to read because her affect is so flat. The content of what she's saying, to me, does seem credible, especially in the context of this crime and these people who were planning it, but planning it in kind of a brainless way. So the content is credible. Her delivery is somewhat credible. Her potential for bias, not bias, her potential for, you know, really for lying in this situation is actually very high because she was given this deal. But at the same time, why would she have taken a deal of 35 years unless she really was intimately involved in this killing? And the idea of her facing the death penalty was a realistic risk for her. So I think it's complicated to assess her credibility. I don't think she's clearly credible. I don't think she's clearly not credible. I think she's going to be sort of in the middle. I think this is going to come down to his own statements really getting him.
Yeah, and that's really, how do you make a perfect witness? What is a perfect witness? It's really hard. Are they too flat? Are they too personality? Are they faking it? We're going to talk more about that in a minute. I just want to give everybody an update right now. The state will rest today. The defense is going to do whatever they're going to do, followed by closing arguments. The jury could have the case by the end of the day, and the penalty phase, if it's needed, if he's found guilty, will begin Monday. So again, this is a very, very interesting case, and we're waiting to see which way it's going to go. I believe we have to take a quick break. I just want to confirm that. Yes, we do. But we're hopefully going to be live in that courtroom very soon. So stay tuned here on Law and Crime. We'll be right back. 911 phone calls of events like this, they're so important, so compelling in that courtroom. The jurors listen to every aspect of it. But I want to bring back in Elura Nanos to talk about a different aspect of this case. If he's found guilty, which may happen today or maybe even tomorrow if the jury's handed it, and again, they may acquit him. But if he's found guilty, then it moves into the sentencing phase. What do you think about the death penalty in this case? And again, we expect in Texas that this might be the first time we've seen the death penalty on the table in some time.
You know, I think that if he gets convicted, I think there's a very good chance that he'll get the death penalty. But I don't know that I would say that it's a slam dunk. I don't know that it ever is. But the cases that, to me, seem like most clear candidates for the death penalty are cases where the victims are children, where there is, you know, very, very sad facts. Not that this isn't sad, but there is a kind of level of detachment because it's a murder for hire situation. There's nothing sort of over the top about it in the way that we have seen with some of the other cases that we've seen on this network. But let's keep in mind, you know, voting to execute somebody is a big deal. And when we're watching and we're not in that courtroom, we're not seeing these actual people, you know, it can be easy to kind of lose sight of the fact that it is difficult to have a hand in voting to execute someone. I know it's a responsibility I would not want. It would be a vote that I would have a very difficult time casting.
Right.
We've seen,
but even though in voir dire, when they're selected, they're saying, "Hey, we're going to have an impartial mind. We can do it if we can elect the death penalty if we believe the case leads us there."
And I have no doubt that all of those jurors firmly believe that when they answered that in voir dire. I just think that it's very different answering that question in a very sterile environment versus being in the room with someone who you may vote to kill. And I think that it's difficult for two reasons. One, there's that sympathy factor, of course. I mean, nobody really wants to be in that position. But then there's also the clarity factor. And one of the reasons why I would never want to vote for the death penalty, it really is to think about, well, what if you're wrong? And although the evidence is overwhelming against Kristopher Love, you know, there's just always that possibility that someone could say, I don't know, I just don't feel comfortable. And I don't think it would be irrational to say that.
We're talking about jurors who are human beings, and they're seeing him every day. They're looking at him. And Laura, you made a great point. You know, they don't necessarily see him or know anything about him before they take that case and they go in. It's not an easy choice. Let's go back, though. We were playing some of the testimony of Hashem Saad, who was that eyewitness to the shooting. We heard his 911 phone call. Let's see how he did under cross-examination. Okay, so you see him being cross-examined there about some discrepancies in his testimony and when he said how many gunshots he heard and this. Now, Elura, we see that a lot, don't we? We see the defense always arguing about every witness. Well, why are these inconsistencies here? So I'm going to ask you, why would there be inconsistencies in an eyewitness account?
Well, I mean, there's been tons of research about eyewitness accounts of crimes and other traumatic events, and the research all shows that witnesses, even eyewitnesses, just don't always get it right, that they don't always perceive things the right way, that their memory is not quite clear. And this is something that sometimes helps the prosecution and other times helps the defense. But the bottom line is, imagine yourself in a situation where a violent crime happens around you that you're not expecting. You're not necessarily in a situation where you're going to be able to remember exactly what happened and exactly the way it happened and be totally credible about it, even if you're trying to be 100% honest. It's just, you know, the factors of the mechanics of recall just don't always work that way.
Yeah.
And we've seen it time and time again that eyewitness accounts of events just are not always exactly reliable.
Especially given what we heard at the beginning of the testimony, how quickly the events unfolded here, especially in a kind of shooting. Shooting cases, you can imagine, get kind of tough to get those details. And by the way, everybody, that's a live feed into the courtroom of Kristopher Love. Nothing's happening yet. As soon as it goes live, we're going to go live. But just so you know, that is the feed currently. But again, Laura, real quick before we go to our break, the idea of how quickly these shootings take place, it's hard to map out what happened.
That's right, and keep in mind, you know, it's hard for us to tell what's going on. We know when we watch these videos, we know what we're going to see. This is a person who was caught totally unaware, had no idea that this was going on, and had to kind of process what was going on around him. And in that processing, it's not only quick, but it's also very traumatic. And I think that's a set of circumstances where there's likely to be some inconsistencies.
Yeah, well, he's not the only person to testify in this case, and we still got the medical examiner coming up for the state. So you're not going to want to miss anything. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, maybe we'll be live in Love. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. Great timing. This is a live feed into the Kristopher Love case out of Texas. The jury is being called in. This man is on trial for capital murder in connection with the shooting death of a pediatric dentist named Kendra Hatcher. And it is alleged that Mr. Love was hired by Brenda Delgado to kill Hatcher because she was enraged by the fact that Hatcher was dating her ex-boyfriend, Ricardo. Get all that? It's a little complicated, and it's a really tragic set of circumstances. I'm back here with Elura Nanos, and maybe I could talk real quick before the next witness comes in. I think we can. We keep talking about the fact about why the defendant should not take the stand. Any quick benefit that you can think of the defendant actually taking the stand?
In this case, not really, because this defendant is going to do a terrible job if he takes the stand.
Well, let me know what you really think about it.
I mean, it is possible that he's going to get on that stand and he's going to point the finger at either Cortez or Delgado. That's possible. But remember, he'd have to do it in a way that's credible and clear. So far, we haven't seen anything like that from this guy.
Yeah, his police interrogation tape didn't go out so well. Okay, we're going to go live into the courtroom, and I believe this is the medical examiner. So let's go live. Okay, so the assistant medical examiner is on the stand right now. Elura, we see medical examiners testify constantly. But everyone's different, and if you're sitting in the state's case, what kind of medical examiner do you want? Who would be the optimal medical examiner?
So as a prosecutor, the medical examiner that you want is someone who is very clear, someone who's almost like a teacher, to really explain what it is that they're doing. Because the medical testimony is not the kind of evidence that requires any kind of spin. It is what it is, and the reason it's helpful to the prosecution's case is because it closes those loopholes in terms of knowing what happens, and also it just naturally adds to the sort of sympathy aspect for the victim, because it's terrible to hear how someone died or how an autopsy was conducted. So it's the content alone is just, it always lends itself to that. So what you want is someone who, when they're on the stand, nothing about the person's delivery of the information obscures the information. You don't want the person to be difficult to understand, either because of the way they're speaking or because of just the way that they convey the information. You don't want them to be totally flat in their presentation. You know, if you get somebody who can liven it up a little bit, that's always nice, although it's not really necessary. But I think clarity is really the most important thing, and authority. You want the person to be sure that they know what they know.
Right. And if you're sitting in the defense and all of our viewers are watching this, what are certain things that they should be looking for, that the defense is probably looking for holes to jump in later under cross-examination? So as we watch her, are there certain things that we should be looking for and be like, oh, that's a good point for the defense to jump in?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this, that the defense already knows what it's going to jump in about. You know, the defense isn't likely to be making decisions on the spot about what it's likely to press this witness on. The defense is going to be looking for anything that the ME's determination on the set of facts could have gone one way or the other way. They're going to be pressing on her medical certainty about certain things. They're going to say, are you really sure that the person was alive for this many minutes or something? Are you really, how sure are you that the person suffered, or is that really what you think, or do you absolutely know that that's the case? So they're going to be pressing her on kind of the level of certainty to what her opinion is.
Right, and that's something to look out for. Now, clearly seems very well spoken. As we talked about, she seems pretty animated. We're going to have to see. This is just the beginning part of her testimony. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be back live. And sadly, this is how we're going to learn about the actual details of what happened to Kendra Hatcher when she was shot. And as difficult it is for us to listen to, imagine what it's like for the family. We'll be right back. Okay, let's talk about the medical examiner's testimony. Really short on the stand. We were expecting longer, but really she made some good points. And Elura, I want to talk about it. We're talking about how long Miss Hatcher would have had to live, and she says there was a significant injury, so she probably didn't survive long after being shot. If she had received medical attention, immediate medical treatment, then maybe she would have survived, but most likely not. If someone shot to the back of the head, how long did they live? Probably dead within a few minutes. That is such a tragic set of circumstances when you think about what happened, and maybe there was a possibility that she could have survived, but it doesn't sound very likely.
You know, I actually think, I mean, absolutely, I agree with you that it's so sad, and all of those factors really go into humanizing not only the victim herself, but just the whole set of circumstances around her death. But I'll say this, I think testimony that says that she might have survived if she had gotten immediate medical attention would be probably more valuable if the crime had happened in a remote location. This crime really did not happen in a remote location. So I don't know how, I don't really know how impactful that really is.
But shooting someone in the head, you are knowingly, you want to kill them. That is an assassination attempt. I mean, it's not like you shoot somebody in the arm and hope for the, you shoot them in the head, you know what you're doing. That's basically what the medical examiner is saying.
Exactly.
And one other thing to note right now, we just got an update that the state has officially rested their case. We are waiting to see what will happen right now, whether the defense will begin their case. I believe they might be going to a brief recess. So what we're going to do in the meantime is take a step back, and we have a special report for you about other news that's trending right now in case you missed it. So here are the top stories of the day.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. Lauren McCluskey, the University of Utah track and field team member killed by her ex-boyfriend on campus, allegedly told university police the man was harassing her, and they reportedly failed to alert his parole officer. 37-year-old Melvin Rowland, a registered sex offender, allegedly shot and killed McCluskey as she spoke to her mother on the phone near a dormitory on campus. Rowland was found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the Trinity AME Church in Salt Lake City. Rowland was convicted of attempted forcible sex abuse and enticing a minor over the internet in 2004 and was registered as a sex offender. The Denver Broncos reportedly released backup quarterback Chad Kelly after he was arrested for trespassing in Colorado. The 24-year-old nephew of Buffalo Bills great Jim Kelly allegedly entered a home and ignored orders to leave before being chased out by an occupant. Kelly reportedly sat on a couch in the home and mumbled incoherently. He now faces a charge of first-degree criminal trespassing. Authorities in Britain are reportedly searching for a thief who has a strong resemblance to actor David Schwimmer. Police in Blackpool posted screen grabs of CCTV surveillance of a suspect reportedly stealing beer who looked like a Ross Geller doppelganger. Schwimmer later released a video of himself sneaking through a store with a crate of beer in hand and denied any involvement in the heist. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
That looks so much like him. It's so eerie. It's like, you know, I'm surprised Matt LeBlanc wasn't with him in that group, that store as well. Pretty crazy. Hey, listen, if you want to follow more of the top trending stories of the day, go to lawandcrime.com. And as always, we have such solid reporting from our very own Anthony Velez. No, I could watch that police interrogation tape the whole day. I know we have 20 hours of it and they condensed it, but it is a fascinating study, is it not, Elura, about why defendants or suspects or people who get arrested for crimes, why they need to lawyer up.
Yeah, I mean, really, for anyone watching, this should be the Exhibit A in if you get arrested, you find yourself in a situation where someone is interrogating you, just ask for a lawyer. And you know what's interesting about it is, you know, historically, lawyers and people who have knowledge of the law do very badly in any kind of under any kind of cross-examination or you know, interrogation, because they're often thinking ahead and trying to predict what the person's saying. People who know nothing about the system also do very badly in interrogations or cross-examinations. So that leaves people who know nothing about the law and people who know a lot about the law. Both do really badly in interrogations.
So who does well?
So that leaves like maybe a slice of people who do okay. But I mean, the thing is, there are so many variables.
Yeah.
And you don't know whether the police are, you know, playing you in some way, whether they're tricking you in some way, which they absolutely can do. Why would you ever go along with this?
I mean, I guess the people that really do well are the people who are innocent and just tell the truth, and the truth will set them free.
I don't know about that. I think you could ask Brendan Dassey about that. Like
that is a, yes, you're right. There are those situations. There are those outliers, and you know, that's a whole separate
But
conversation.
I think that that's exactly why, that people believe that if they have nothing to hide, they should just talk, or that it appears that way, and that's what maybe compels them to talk.
Well, as you heard him say, I don't know any white dentists, I don't know any black dentists, I don't know anything about this. But his testimony, that the police interrogation tape was heard by the jury. And that's not the only thing that the jury heard, because this whole plot was also unfolded by Crystal Cortez when she took the stand. And you can hear her very clearly say how Mr. Love was not only the shooter, but he was intimately involved with the details of this plot. Take a look. Okay, so as you hear, they had many ideas how to get rid of Miss Hatcher, but they went with the shooting plot. You know, Elura, we're waiting right now. We're in about a 10-minute recess. It may be longer. We're waiting to see what the defense will do. And Crystal, that's a live shot into the courtroom. Crystal Cortez was just one of many of the incriminating pieces of testimony that were put forward by the prosecution. What's the defense going to do today?
You know, I think we don't know. And that's why, that is really what is so exciting about watching a network like this, where we're in the courtroom live and we don't have any advance warning of exactly what's going to happen. And we're experiencing this right along with the jury. The defense could do nothing, could simply rest their case and then give a really good oral argument on summation, explaining to the jurors how the defense can break down these different pieces of evidence that the prosecution has offered, and basically argue there's no reasonable doubt here. There is reasonable doubt, and the prosecution hasn't met its burden.
Yeah.
You know, the defense could put on a case of their own. We'll have to see if that happens.
We're waiting, I guess, to see if they say, Mr. Love, would you like to take the stand?
Now, I would have to say this, though. The decision to testify, of course, the ultimate decision is up to the defendant himself. However, that decision is not going to be made in a vacuum. The defense lawyer would counsel the defendant whether or not to go on the stand. And in this case, the defense lawyer would have to counsel him to stay off the stand. I think it would be malpractice otherwise.
Otherwise, I mean, he did so well in the interrogation tape. So it looks like the jury is coming in. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be live. Stay tuned.
Shocker.
All right, everybody, we have an update right now in the Kristopher Love case out of Texas. It is official. The defense has just rested their case. They did not call any witnesses, and that means also they did not call Kristopher Love to the stand. He chose not to testify. This is something that we were talking about a little bit earlier on. We're not really sure exactly the next step. We believe that maybe it will be closing arguments. But let's talk right now, for the last time, unfortunately, I have to sign her off, Elura Nanos, about this. Elura, you predicted that this was a possibility, that they would just not put on a case.
Yeah, I mean, that happens in many, many cases. Remember, the burden of proof does not lie with the defense. The entire burden of proof lies with the prosecution. And there may be, this may be a very strategic move to say, hey, we're just going to make this worse for ourselves. We don't have any witnesses that are really sympathetic or credible, that are going to really exonerate this defendant in any way. So the best that we can do is aggressive cross-examination, which they did, and a strong summation, which argues for the jury disregard this evidence or find it incredible.
One more update for you. We have just been told that there are no closing arguments in this case. That means there's no closing either from the defense or the prosecution. The defense here didn't even give an opening statement. I'm going to get one more comment from you, Laura. I don't think I've seen this before. No closings?
No, that's weird. I don't understand why they wouldn't do closings. I mean, that can only help them. I guess they're thinking it's better to just leave things unsaid and just hope that it stands for itself. But I think that that's a risky move.
Really strange. Hey, listen, Elura, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate you coming on such an
Jesse.
early morning and staying here for such a great time. It was great having you.
Thanks. See you soon.
See you soon. All right, everybody. Here's what we're going to do as we wait to see what's happening in the courtroom. This is a huge development. Let's take a step back and talk about how we ended up where we are right now. One of the things that you may not have seen was, again, the police interrogation tape of Kristopher Love. And I want to continue that right now, where he actually clashes with Eric Barnes, the investigator. Let's play that for you right now.
About this, when you get to the